assess how did they do. So the tiers I've got here is, oops, this should be the wrong way, this is the wrong way around, but one window. So a team who had the best window in the Prem. I will put some contenders in there throughout the vid, but only one will get it. Good window, average window, poor window, and lost for windows. Same thing here with lost and won, so very simple. Now, it's important to note that when I am assessing these, it's not just a case of, oh, they signed this player who's good, it's automatically a good window. Here I'm assessing a lot of things, okay? So I'm assessing firstly, what did they need at the start of the summer? What did they need going into it? And did they address all of the areas they needed to address? Who did they bring in? Of course, it's the main one. And the quality of the players they brought in, because some teams, might need a new goalkeeper, and they might have brought a new keeper, but the goalkeeper they bought might not actually be that good. How much did they spend overall? Did they overspend on most of their players? Did they get some of them for a cheap price? But also a big one actually is to factor in player sales. How well did they sell? Did they sell the players they needed to? And also, something that people overlook is, did you keep your best players? Did you, particularly for those sort of lower half teams, did you sell any of your best players, or did you manage to keep hold of them? And if you did sell them, did you get a good fee for them? So all of that is going to get factored in here, but let's get straight into it. So we've got Arsenal up first. So Arsenal have brought in Martin Zubimendi, Ebrice Eze, Victor Gyökeres, Noni Madueke, Christian Mosquera, Christian Norgard, Kepa, and Piero Hincapié. In terms of outgoings, Nuno Tavares, Marquinhos, Jacob Kivios, Sambi Lokonga, Tierney, Jorginho, Partey, Reece Nelson, Zinchenko, Fabio Vieira, and Tomiyasu. And instantly we're starting off with, I think it's pretty clear, a contender for wonder window here. Arsenal did have a very good window. In terms of the things they needed to do, they did it. Outgoings, they had a lot of dead wood which they needed to get rid of, and they did get rid of most of it. In terms of incomings, they needed, of course, that main starting striker, and they got it in Victor Gyökeres. In an ideal situation, maybe they could have got like an Isak or something, but getting Gyökeres is fine. They needed a striker for a while, and they got it. They needed cover for William Saliba and Gabriel, particularly after selling Kivior, and they got it with Pierre Hincapié and also Mosquera, who looks okay so far. They needed a new DM to replace Thomas Partey. They got it with Martin Zubimendi. They needed a backup right winger. They got it with Bakayos. They needed a backup for Saka, and they got it with Madueke. And they needed a new left winger, and they got it with Ebrice Eze. So they really addressed all of the areas of needs. Now, I do think they overpaid slightly for a couple of them. For example, Madueke, I'm not too keen on that deal. Paying 50 mil for him as a backup is not amazing, but to put simply, did Arsenal improve their team? Yes, massively, and they hit everything we needed to do. And I like most of their signings they made, so they're definitely a contender for sure. Aston Villa is up next, and it's really the other end of the spectrum here. So Aston Villa brought in Evan Guisson, Victor Lindelof, Martin Bizot, Jadon Sancho, and Harvey Elliott. And in terms of outgoings, they let go of Jacob Ramsey, Leon Bailey, Enzo Barrenechea, Coutinho, Moreno, Dendoncker, Olsen. And they also did not renew the loans of Disasi, Asensio, and Rashford. And for me, you know what, I think they're actually a contender here for loss for window Villa. When I look at Villa, I look at their squad now compared to the start of the summer, and I'm like, did it really improve? I don't know. I actually fear that it could potentially have got worse here, because they lost several squad players, the likes of Jacob Ramsey, Leon Bailey, Asensio Disasi. They eventually did replace him, but the players they brought in are quite a bit of gambles. You know, Jadon Sancho is a big gamble. Harvey Elliott, I think, is again a little bit of a gamble. You don't know what necessarily going to get with Harvey Elliott. Lindelof is like whatever, sure. Evan Quaison is a signing which I'm like, okay, I like that. And I will say for Villa, they did well in terms of they didn't lose anyone. They didn't lose Watkins, they didn't lose Emi Martinez, Morgan Rogers. All these guys had links away. But I look at that Villa squad, and as I said, has it actually improved? I mean, Asensio was a key player actually for them last year. Rashford contributed quite a bit for them. Jacob Ramsey and Liam Bailey played a lot of games. And I don't know if Elliott, Sancho and Quaison will make up for the loss of those players. So, and I also don't think actually any of them are even going to be nailed on starters. Like, as the starting 11 for Villa improved, I don't think so. So I think they're a contender here for losing the window. Next up we have Bournemouth, who brought in Bafode Diakate, Jordi Petrovic, Ben Doak, Amin Adli, Milosavic, Adrian Truffet and Alex Jimenez. And they sold Zabanye, Howson, Kirkes, Dango Dara, Billing, Travers, Sinistera, and a bunch of other couple players too. Bournemouth, I think though, had a good window, all things considered. Now, the thing with Bournemouth, it was always going to be inevitable. They were going to lose players. It was just a case of how many and how could they replace them and use that money. And I think, all things considered, things went pretty well. They got very good money for Zabanye, Howson, Kirkes decent money too, very good money for Dango Atara, but they managed to keep hold of and even tie down to a new contract, Semenyo, which is huge, kept off of all their other players. And then I think the replacements they brought in are actually pretty decent. Jordi Petrovic and goal for Kepa I think is an upgrade. Bafode Diakate I think is a smart signing. Adrian Truffet I think could be really, really good at left back. Maybe another centre back would have been ideal, but I think Senesi is fine paired with Diakate. And then I think Ben Doak could potentially be good, but I think Amin Adli is a really nice signing. Add a bit of depth in the attack. So all in all, yes, Bournemouth lost 3 key players, but I think they replaced them pretty well and they got good fees for them, so I think it was a good window. Brentford, on the other hand, well, they brought in Dango Dara, they brought in Malambo, Michael Chiodi, Kelleher, and Jordan Henderson, and Reece Nelson too. And they sold Brian Mbeumo, Johan Wisser, Christian Norgard, Mark Flecken. It's another contender for losing the window in my opinion. I look at Brentford and again it's like Bournemouth, it was going to be inevitable that they were probably going to lose some players. But where I said, you know, Bournemouth got good fees, Brentford did get good fees, but Bournemouth invested it quite well. I don't think Brentford have done the same. Brentford lost Mbeumo, Wisser, Norgard and Flecken. They brought Kelleher in to replace Flecken, that's fine. They brought Jordan Henderson to replace Norgard, that's fine, but their 2 best goal scorers, their top goal scorers, the only goal scorers really in the team, gone, and Mbeumo and Wisser, they got good money, but they used that money to sign Dango Atara and Reece Nelson. I mean, really, like, Dango Atara is good, but they massively overpaid. He's very inconsistent. I think he'll do alright at Brentford, but at the end of the day, he wasn't even a regular starter for Bournemouth. And Reece Nelson is always injured and has really never ever put up like insane goal or assist numbers, never been fit enough to play a 30 plus game Prem season. So you've swapped Mbeumo and Wisser for Reece Nelson and Dango Atara. I think that's really worrying, and I think Brentford's business has left them in a position where they could be in a real fight to stay up this season, because I just simply think they have drastically weakened their squad, and unlike Bournemouth, have not replaced their key players well at all. Brighton up next. So they have signed Costulas, De Kuiper, Tom Watson, Diego Coppola and Olivier Buscaglia. In terms of outgoings, there's been a lot. Joao Pedro, Simon Adingra, Enciso, Estupinan, Lamptey, Evan Ferguson, Buonanotte, Matt O'Reilly, and I could go on here. All in all, I think it was an okay window, but in average for Brighton. Brighton are always a hard one to assess. I feel like you have to look at their window sort of in 2-3 years' time, because they always sign a bunch of young, up-and-coming guys, but never really chuck them straight into the first team. And then sort of like in 2-3 years, these guys do well. And I think that's the same, with someone like Costulas. We'll have to wait and see how he does. Same with Coppola, but yeah, look, they didn't lose anyone massive. They lost Joao Pedro, which is a little bit annoying, but they got decent money for him. Got rid of a lot of deadwood and trimmed down that squad. Brought in a couple decent players. I think it's perfectly fine from Brighton. Burnley, so Burnley brought in Leslie Ukachukwu, Armando Broya, Juano, Bashir Humphreys, Hartman, Jadon Anthony, Cian Fleming, Florentino, Axel Tuanzebe, Dubravka and Kyle Walker. They sold James Trafford, Masengo and like a bunch of randoms. Okay, Burnley. I'm gonna say it's an average window as well for Burnley. I like a couple of their signings, but I feel like it's been a little bit mix and match. They added a little bit of experience with Dubravka and Kyle Walker, which is fine. But then they added like some youngsters in there, and then they added like some sort of prem guys who are a bit of punts. I think Ukachukwu is a nice one, but Armando Broya is a little bit of a punt. I think they did overpay slightly. That guy from Lazio, Juana, again is a little bit of a punt. All in all, did Burnley do enough to say, I think they are going to stay up now? Absolutely not. And actually, you know what, for that reason, I think they're going to drop into poor window, because I don't look at any of those signings and think, wow, Burnley might stay up now, except Florentino, I think is a good move. And they lost James Trafford as well, and replaced him with Dubravka, who's alright, but yeah, like I said, now that I think about it, I don't think Burnley actually made any moves where I think they are definitely going to stay up now. I don't think they got anyone in the attack to score the goals. Yeah, slightly disappointing. Slightly disappointing. Okay, next up, Chelsea. We have Joao Pedro, Jamie Gittins, Garnacho, Yoel Hato, Liam Delap, Esteval, and Facundo Buonanotte. And in terms of sales, a whole bunch. I'm not going to go through every one here, but the main ones: Madueke, Nkunku, Joao Felix, Nicholas Jackson, Jordi Petrovic, Kieran Dewsbury Hall, and a bunch of others. And I'm not gonna lie, I think we had a poor window, if I'm keeping it honest here. When I look at what we needed to do at the start of the summer, I think we did some of it, but a lot of it we neglected. We needed a goalkeeper and we did not get it. We probably needed another centre-back with Levi Cole getting injured and we didn't get it. We needed cover for Cucurella at left back, we did get it, and I'm happy with the Hato signing. We needed some wingers and we did sign wingers, but I don't, Gittins and Garnacho, I'm not overly excited about them. They're two very young, very raw wingers. And we needed two strikers, and we did get those, and I'm happy about those. Joao Pedro and Liam Delap are very good moves, which sort of saved this window, in my opinion, for Chelsea. But yeah, I look at this and I think, maybe some of these guys, maybe Gittins, maybe Garnacho could do really well, but is Joao Pedro, Gittins, Garnacho, Hato, Delap, and Buonanotte going to kick Chelsea on here this season and make us start competing with the top two? No, so I think it's been a poor window for that reason. But we did extremely well on the sales, which is why we're definitely not a contender for lost a window. Very well in terms of sales. Right, Crystal Palace Palace is up next, and they signed Jeremy Pino, Jeremy Campbell, Borna Sosa, and Walter Benitez, and also Uche on loan. They sold Abriche Eze, Edouard Holding, Schlupp. I think it was all in all an okay window for Palace. I'll put them in average. With Palace, it was really about keeping their best players. It was links away for Mateta, he stayed. It was links away for Gay, and of course he stayed in the end. There were links away with Eze, and they did end up selling him, but it's one of those where it was inevitable. Now, did they really replace him? Jeremy Pino has come in as sort of as a replacement. I think he's okay. I think he'll do alright. Actually, wait, hold on. It's another one. I'm gonna actually drop it to poor window now that I think about it. Palace are in Europe, and I think they needed to add a bit of depth to this team. And I'm looking at the signings here, and if Jeremy Pino doesn't bang, if he doesn't take time to, if he takes the time to adjust, Palace don't have any depth in that attacking position, and they could have a real fall off there without Eze. I feel like they needed to get another attacker in alongside Pino. And I look at who's their backup right wing back, etc. I think they needed to add a little bit more depth. I would have liked to see them add some more bodies and use that Eze money a little bit more, but it's not the end of the world. Right, Everton, they have signed Tyler Dibling, Diano Barry, Dewsbury Hall, Carlos Alvarez, Adam Asnu, Mark Travers, Merlin Roll, Jack Grealish, and Sales, Neil Mopay, Calvert-Lewin, Holgate, Ashley Young, Decore, and a bunch of other people have left the club. I think it was a good window for Everton. Definitely a good window for Everton. I don't think I can quite say they're a contender for winning the window because they lost so many players, Everton. And I feel like their squad is still a little bit thin, particularly at the back. But they did well. And what I really like is they really youthed up this squad. They signed some young talents, players like Diano Barry, Tyler Dibling, Adam Asnu, but then they've also added some more experienced guys who will help them now, like Dewsbury Hall and Jack Grealish. So I think Everton actually had quite a fun window. They had a lot of business to do. They did most of it. As I said, I would have probably liked to see them sign some more bodies, like another right back, maybe another left back, but all in all, they did pretty well. Next up we have Nottingham Forest. I don't particularly know why they're here, but okay. So they signed, God, I gotta take a breath of this, Amari Hutchinson, Dan Ndoye, Delane Bakwa, Anu Galamawendo, James McAdee, Igor Jesus, Nicola Savona, Gunya, John Victor, Cabano, Douglas Louise, and Zinchenko. And in terms of sales, Anthony Elanga, Omar Bamadeli, Turner, Panzo, O'Brien, and a bunch of other guys. Right, Forest, I think have had a good window as well. See, sort of, this is what I was saying with Palace, where Forest needed to add a bunch of depth to their squad because they're in Europe this season, and they certainly did that. They signed so many players. My only thing with them is I feel like they signed a bit too many players. Like they sort of reverted to the old Forest and just signed like 500 players in each position. Like they signed Hutchinson, Ndoye, Bakwa, and McAdee, who all can play on the right. They signed Igor Jesus and Galamawendo, who are both strikers. Plus they've got Chris Wood there. They kept all of Sangare. They've still got Yates and all of these midfielders plus Douglas Louise. Like now they've just got a bunch of players here, but I do like a lot of their business. And also a key one for Forest is they didn't lose Gibbs White, managed to get him to a new contract. They did lose Elanga, but they kept hold of most of their key guys from last season. So I think it was a good window. I think they maybe did a little bit too much in the end. Now they've probably got too big of a squad, but I think it was a good window. Next up we have Fulham. So Fulham on the other hand didn't really do too much. They signed Kevin, Sara, Benjamin Lecomte and Samuel Chukwueze, and they sold Andres Pereira. I think it was an average window for Fulham. They didn't really need to do too much because they didn't actually lose many key players. They kept hold of pretty much everyone, like Rodrigo Muniz and Anthony Robinson, who were linked away, which is good. But they didn't really add too much. I mean, they spent a lot of money on Kevin, who could be a real exciting one. We'll have to wait and see how he does. And Samuel Chukwueze is a little bit of a punt on a loan with an option to buy. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, they added a couple bits to the attack, but really not a whole lot going on for Fulham. I don't think they needed to do too much, but it's pretty average. Leeds, they signed Anton Stagno, Okafor, Jakob Bijol, Lucas Perry, Sean Longstaff Goodmanson, James Justin, Bornau, Calvert-Lewin and Lucas Nemecha. Selling Rasmus Christensen, Junior Verbo, Max Wober, and Patrick Bamford. Leeds, I'm gonna say another average window. I think they did alright. I think they definitely improved their squad and increased their chances of staying up in the Premier League. But did they do enough to say, for me to say, oh, Leeds are staying up 100%? Absolutely not. But I did do like the signings they've made, a couple of them, like Anton Stagg, Jakob Bijol, Lucas Perry, Goodmanson. I think these guys are decent additions. Sean Longstaff had some nice experience too. I think they needed a little bit more though, particularly in the attack, only signing Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Nemecha in the attack, and Okafor, who all of them, haven't really done too well in the last couple seasons. I would have liked them to do a bit more in the attack, and that would have boosted them to have a good window, but I think they did alright. Right, Liverpool, who signed, of course, Isaac, Verts, Ekatike, Kirkes, Frimpong, Leone, and they sold Diaz, Nunes, Kwanzaa, Doak, Kelleher, Trent, and Harvey Elliott is obviously a contender for Wonder Window. I mean, I don't really need to go through this, right? What did Liverpool need at the start of a window? They needed a replacement for Trent, they got it. They needed a new left back, they got it. They needed centre-back depth, they got it with Leone. That's maybe one of the only areas they struggled a little bit, not getting Gay, but they needed a new striker, they got it. They needed two new strikers, they got it. They didn't even need a new 10, but they got it. So yeah, obviously Liverpool are a contender here for winning the window. Manchester City, so they signed Johnny Reinders, Ryan Ignery, Ryan Shirky, James Trafford and Donnarumma. And they sold James McAtee, Edison, Kevin De Bruyne, Kyle Walker, Akanji and Jack Grealish. I think City had an okay window. I'm going to put it in average, that might be controversial, but when I'm thinking about it, and again I look at this okay, what did Man City need going into this window? Firstly, I don't think they even needed a new goalkeeper, but they've gone ahead and signed two keepers and sold Edison, which I think is a little bit weird, and which is not really necessary to do, but sure, fine. They needed a left back, they did get the left back. They needed a right back though badly. They really needed a right back, and they didn't get a right back. They needed to replenish the midfield. Johnny Reinders is nice, but maybe another one in there could have been good. And then they needed a replacement for De Bruyne, which they got in Shirky, which is fine. But I just look at City and I say, did they improve their squad enough for me to say, oh, they're going to be, winning the league next season? I don't think so. Like I said, I feel like they desperately needed a right back. They didn't get it. I think they could have ideally gone and got another winger. If they had signed a Rodrigo, I would have been like, if they signed Rodrigo and they signed, I don't know, Livramento, I would have been like, oh damn, City might actually be back. They might actually be winning the league next season. Whereas I look at their team now and I'm like, you improved this team right now, and you didn't address those, so that's why I think it was average. Man United, so they signed Benjamin Sesko, Brian Mbeumo, Mateus Cunha, Sam Lamans. They sold Garnacho, Anthony, Højlund, Rashford, Sancho and Lindelof. And again, I'm going to put in an average window for very similar reasons here. Man United had a lot to do, and he did address quite a few of the areas, but there are still major holes which they did not address. And the areas they even did address, I still have my concerns. You know, goalkeeper they needed to address. They did sign a goalkeeper, but he's very young, and let's see how he does. It's a bit of a gamble. The attack, they did address it, and Mbeumo, Cunha, Sesko, nice. I think they massively overpaid for pretty much all of those, but they, fair enough. They addressed their attack. But not to sign a midfielder is absolutely crazy in my opinion, because that was probably just right behind the attack in terms of the biggest issue at Man United. No DM signed. I think that's really going to come back to bite them. And as I said again, there's still areas in this United squad which have holes, particularly the midfield. Maybe another left wing back to cover for Dorgu would have been nice. Maybe another right wing back would have been good. For that reason, they did address a lot of the stuff they needed to do, but they didn't do it all. So it's an average window. Newcastle, they signed Waldemar, Elanga, Wissa, Jacob Ramsey, Malik Chow and Ramsdale. And he sold Isaac, Lloyd Kelly, Longstaff, Callum Wilson and Dubravka. You know what? Newcastle, they were very slow starters, but actually I think all in all, when it's all been said and done, they had a good window. When we look at it this way, Newcastle managed to keep hold of Bruno, who managed to keep hold of Gordon and all of their players. They sold Isaac, which obviously is a major loss, but they got good money for him. They got 130 odd million for him, which is great. They used that money and they signed 2 strikers, which they needed to do. They massively overpaid, of course, for Waldemar, and they probably overpaid for Wissa. But they did sign 2 strikers, and 2 pretty good strikers. They signed one who is proven, who has done really well and is ready to compete now in Wissa. And then they signed one who is a little bit more of a long-term signing for the future, who maybe could become the next Isaac, and is an exciting youngster. Like I said, they probably overpaid massively, but they did sign 2 strikers and 2 good strikers. So I like it. They needed a new right winger, and they signed a new right winger in Elanga. Again, probably a bit of an overpay, but they got one in. And then they bolstered their depth a bit. They got Malik Chow to add a bit of depth at the back. They added a bit of depth in goalkeeping department with Ramsdale, and they added some depth in midfield with Jacob Ramsey. So I think Newcastle massively overpaid. Obviously missed out on a lot of key targets, but in the end I actually think they addressed all of the areas they needed to address. I really do. So I think they had a good window. Spurs is next now, and Tottenham signed Xavi Simons, Mo Kudus, Tel Danso, Joao Palinha and Colomwani. They sold Son, Højbjerg, Brian Hill and Manuel Solomon. Spurs, I think it's very similar to United really. Spurs had a ton of stuff to do and areas to address. They did address some of them, but not all of them. They eventually got a 10 in Xavi Simons, which is a nice signing. They did get a new DM in Joao Palinha, and they got a bit of depth in that forward line with Colomwani, which is not bad. And they also signed a new right winger in Kudus, which is fine. But they didn't get another centre back besides making that Danso deal permanent. They didn't get another left winger. I feel like they probably could have done with another central midfielder too. So I players they brought in, I just think similar to United, is just not enough. So it's an average window. Sunderland is up next now, and oh boy, okay, I'm not going through all of these, but they signed Diarra, Adingra, Lefebvre, Brian Brobby, Talibi, Sadiki, Xhaka, Mukiele, Bertrand Traore, Ronaldo, Masuaku, Gertruda. They sold Joe Bellingham, Tom Watson, Ekwar, and a bunch of other guys too. That Sunderland, you know what? It's a wonder window contender, but simply Sunderland did all they possibly could to try and stay up. Like, you have to put this relative and in perspective here compared to these guys. Sunderland, they have tried all they possibly could to try and stay up in this division in terms of they added a bunch of experience with the likes of Xhaka, Mukiele, Masuaku, Ronaldo. I like it. And then he added a bunch of really exciting youngsters like Habib Diarra and Talibi from Club Brugge. Then he added like players who maybe could be really good, like Gertruda and Brian Brobby. I think, you know, what more could Sunderland really do? I still think they might go down, but like I said, I don't think they could have done much more, possibly Sunderland here, to try and stay up, so I think they're a contender here. West Ham then, so they signed Matheus Fernandes, Tadibon Berman, Diouf Hermansen, Magassa, Walker Peters, Callum Wilson and Igor. They sold Mo Kudos, Aguerd, Alvarez, Emerson, Gufau, Creswell, Ings, and a bunch of other guys too. Okay, it's a pretty poor window for West Ham, to be honest here, because look, they managed to keep hold of Paqueta, which is good, but they sold Mohamed Kudos, and I don't think they even replaced him. Like, they didn't really replace him, to be honest, which is crazy. The signings they made, I like Diouf, I like Magassa. Walker Peters is like whatever. Callum Wilson is again like whatever. Matheus Fernandes, I like the signing, massive overpay though. But like West Ham, they really needed to do a lot. Like, their squad needed to be replenished, their squad needed a lot more, they needed a bunch of new signings, they needed a little bit more spark in the attack, and they just didn't really add it. But because I do like some of their signings, I don't think they're a contender for losing the window, but I think they had a poor window. And finally Wolves, so they signed Larson on a permanent, Eric Adair, Fer Lopez, Craigie, John Arias, Chachachu, Wolf, and they sold Cunha, Aitnuri, Fabio Silva, Guedes and Semedo. You know what, I think they actually are a contender for losing the window, Wolves. It's sort of similar to Brentford here. They lost a lot of key players, which it happens. Cunha, Aitnuri, Semedo, they got good money for Cunha and Aitnuri, but 3 key players lost, and did they replace them well or use that money well? I do not think so. Chachachu comes in for Semedo, I don't know about that. Wolf comes in for Aitnuri, sure. But then, you know, in the attack, John Arias I think is alright, Fer Lopez is okay, but both of them are quite gambles there. You're not sure how they're going to do. Eric Adair is just a backup striker. I don't think they really replaced Cunha properly. They're sort of just hoping Arias or Lopez do well. I think for a team that, you know, is going to be competing to stay up, you know, I think they've weakened, Wolves have weakened their squad this summer. So yeah. Now, in terms of these 3 who had the worst window, I am going to move Villa up, just because, you know, they did keep hold of their best players compared to these 2. But I think the worst window was actually Brentford here, because I'm sorry to lose Wissa and Mbuemo. You know, Kevin Schade, Igor Thiago didn't really score many goals, and you replace him with Dango Atara and Reece Nelson. Like, you didn't even sign another striker, like an out-and-out striker. It's absolutely crazy in my opinion, and Brentford have significantly weakened their squad, and I think they've signings to try and stay up. And in terms of winning the window, I mean, it's pretty clear. Look, Arsenal and Sunderland had good windows, but it's got to be Liverpool. I mean, they signed the second best striker in the Prem. They signed one of the best attacking mids in the world. They signed one of the best left backs in the Prem. They signed one of the best attacking right backs in the Prem. Like I said, on top of the cherry would have been nice to have Mark Yea, but Leone's fine. Liverpool, for me, won the window. But there we go. Those are my rankings. Let me know if you disagree or agree with them in the comments below. And if you guys have enjoyed